Hey guys, I'm here with Stephen from Diablo. We're doing a little bit of a clinic here at Mariner Sales today. Why don't you tell us about what we're going to run into?
Well, we're going to talk about the various Diablo models and fly fishing out of the Diablo platform.
These have really blown up in the area lately. What would you think draws everyone to a Diablo?
Mainly because it's different than what they're used to seeing in a typical fly fishing kayak. What we look for is we make a simple, flat, wide open cockpit platform that you're just as comfortably standing up fishing in as you are sitting down paddling fishing. Right? It also will get extremely skinny, with about a 275-pound weight range of man and gear. Even this boat, the Chupacabra, which is only 10 foot 6 inches long, still only needs about 4 inches of water to float. And the weight, that's one of the main things. Whereas you're going from a boat that's close to 100 pounds, like the Chupacabra that we're standing in front of here, only weighs 59 pounds an acre.
Yeah, that's almost half of what I'm used to.
I'm not good at math, but it's close to half.
Awesome, man. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Appreciate you coming by.
Anytime. So when I'm bass fishing, okay, I'm rigged to fish from 0 to about 10 feet down. And I do that with, I carry 3 spools for fly. I switch out on my existing rig, okay, because I don't really want to carry. I usually carry 2 rods, one rig topwater permanent, and one that's already rigged with a intermediate sinking line with some sort of bait fish pattern. I like bluegill and shad stuff. That's what I like. So, and then in that rod with the sinking line on it, I have 2 different, or sometimes 3 different speeds of sinking line to get down to different depths. Follow me? And the reason you want that is like your topwater fishing is pretty easy. You lay a fly out and pop it back to you. It's all on the surface, it's all linear, you want it as straight as possible, throw it at the nose of the boat, bring it right back, right? With a fly, however, it's all in your stripping hand. So how you strip the fly, and I vary it up, you know, sometimes I'll give it like 3, 3, 3, you know, 1, 2, 3 pause. And it depends on the fly too. I use a lot of articulated stuff that has, you know, 1, sometimes 2, or some of my brown trout flies with this one. Really? Oh my gosh, yeah, we'll get into that in a second. So, and depending on the type of fly, if I have one that has like a fish skull helmet on, that changes. So some flies like a hard strip and a long pause, and they'll just go boom, boom, in all this crazy different direction. And that's what triggers that predator. I've caught a lot of fish, so now when I'm fishing for whatever I'm hunting for big fish. And if I don't catch any, that's okay. If I catch one good fish, then my day, I'm stoked. Or on a trip, sometimes just one good fish at the end of a 3-day trip just saves the whole trip. So like my bass streamers are anywhere from yay big, 3 to 6 inches. A bass will eat anything it can fit in its mouth, regardless of the size of bass. Either bluegill, primary bass foods in every lake, shad, obviously, and then also things that are colored like baby bass. Bass are cannibals. Most fish are cannibals. So, and depending on how you're stripping that, then you're going to give it action. Everybody follow that? So 1, 2, sometimes I'll do little strips and make them just go. So once I have given up and bitten the bullet and pulled the top water off, which is usually about an hour after I should have been, then I'll switch to the bass rod with, you know, a sinking line. So my first bass line that goes underwater, I want to fish the first 2 feet of the water. Okay? So I use the clear lines, a little more stealthy. And I'm pulling bait fish in the first 2 feet of the water column. Make sense? And the reason I want to use a sinking line, when people say, why not just put like a, you know, a clouser minnow on the end of your leader? Well, that works too. But the problem with that is you throw the clouser out. Let's say you got a 9-foot leader. Okay, it's the common size for a flatline leader, 9 feet, prepackaged. Line doesn't sink like this, so it's not going to go 9 feet down. All right, it make sense? So it's going to sink like this. Okay, so at 9 feet, the most you're going to get is 4.5, right? So let's say you get it down to 4.5. Every time you strip it, it's going up. Okay, you want something moving linear. Okay, so what I do is I use a lighter fly, maybe not such a dumbbell head or a heavy fly, and I let the line do the sinking. Because then once the line, you got a 15-foot sink tip, it's also going to sink like this, but it's going to easily get down to maybe 6 feet max if you let it. But it's going to pull real nice through that 2-3 foot range. And once it sinks down there, you're moving that fly in a nice linear motion. So you can bring it like, you can see grass or rocks. Bring that over the top of that or over the top of structure. Snatch it around in there, and that's usually when fish come out and explode out of that stuff and crush it. If that's not doing it and I want to go like 2 to 6 feet down, then I go to a sinking line that's more like a 20-something foot head and sinks somewhere around 4 to 5 inches per second. And then that last bib, I want to go 7 to 10, it's a longer one that sinks about 7 inches per second. All those, so I can hit those different marks. Those are kind of like your marks to me underwater. 2-ish, 3-ish feet, around 7-ish feet, and then down around 10. That's how I set up for bass. Real simple, less gear, 2 rods rigged, and then 2 to 3 spools for one. Okay. Now redfish, I do a similar setup, but redfish are almost always a sight fish. Something about sneaking up on a tail on redfish, pulling after it in the marsh for 40, 50 yards while you lumbers around, and then quietly sliding in there, dropping your fly in his mouth, having him freak out on the end of your line. It's pretty cool. So I do also keep 2 rods rigged for redfish because they will crush a topwater. And if I am not seeing fish, or I'm in, let's take a situation like when we went to ICAST, we stopped down in Louisiana on Big Lake or Lake Calcasieu down what they call the West Cove, and the water was really murky. I mean, like you couldn't see anything, but there were fish boiling all around. Definitely redfish. So whenever I would see a boil or see an explosion, I just fire a big popper in there and just start making a bunch of racket. And then I keep a bait fish pattern rigged. Usually, the most I'll go with a redfish on a sinking line is a clear intermediate tip because I'm just rarely fishing deep water. I have gone to the jetties before and caught some nice fish where you go full sinking line, let it sink down really deep, pull it back. But again, that's just not how I like to fish. I'd rather paddle around all day and get skunked. That's just me. So I started out, fly rod laying on the deck of the boat, fly line out, fly in the cork, see a redfish, set the thing down, grab my rod, turn around.
Where'd he go?
Where'd the fish go? Okay. Usually when I'm redfishing, I'm in my Amigo. Okay. It's also longer. So unlike this boat, I can put the handle on my rod here, and the tip will still be contained inside the frame of the boat. That makes sense? So for today, I'm just going to use this. We're going to pretend like this is the front of the Amiga. How I have myself set up now, redfishing, is I'm kind of hemmed in by right here. This is my spot, right? So I've got my rod. I tried so many different things. I've tried a roto grip attached to the C-clamp on the chair. And what I found were these cup holders from Academy are like multi-purpose use. Not only do they hold stuff, you can take the bottoms out, I can run a net through them, you can put rods through them if you have conventional tackle. But more than anything, it allowed me to get what I wanted to. Because where I was trying to get to is I'm paddling through the marsh and I see a redfish. Ooh. So what I used to do is set this down quietly, get my rod, and then look up and then curse because I took my eyes off the redfish and now he's gone, unless it's like really clear water. Okay. So now what I'll do is, with the addition of these guys, as I'm paddling along, take this, set it down. I've got a stripping mat that I use in the floor of the boat. I grab my rod, it's already loaded, fly comes off, bang. I've never had to take my eyes off the fish. Because if you take your eyes off of that redfish in even semi-murky water, they're usually gone. Because they kind of go all over. Redfish is like, oh, whoa, it's over here. Oh, there's something back here. And they'll just kind of wallow around in an area and give you plenty of times to bash them in the head with flies. I've hit redfish in the head with flies, had them run, and then turn around and then go, whoa, wait, and then come back and hit the same fly. So you don't have to be an expert marksman with the rod. How I like to present a fly to a redfish is if his head's facing this way, or if, let's say his head's facing the I'm the redfish and I'm going this direction. I kind of want it coming out of this frame of view. So not straight across my nose, kind of at an angle where it's already puts me on the tail of it and initiates that prey drive. It's the same thing that makes like a dog chase a squirrel, right? Squirrel runs, furry thing runs. Something in the DNA tells the dog, go get furry thing, and it doesn't know why, it just wants to go chase it, right? And fish will do the same thing. Varying twitches, speeds, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it'll drive you crazy. I can't tell you how many. You're talking about this when I made reference to my brown trout fly. So I go to Arkansas a lot, fish the White River and the North Fork. And if you've never been up there, you don't know about it, there are legit 40-pound brown trout in that river. But yeah, up there, again, I'm hunting for, I've caught a tremendous amount of trout. I'm ready to catch like one of these big 30 to 36 inch monsters. And so I'm using flies that are anywhere from 6 to sometimes 10 inches long, like a 3 or 4/0 Gamakatsu in the front and a 2/0 in the back with 3 or 4 articulation links, tied to look like a small rainbow trout or a brown trout or sometimes just olive over white. And again, we're talking sinking lines, 8-weight rods, heavy gear when I'm doing this. Streamer fishing up there is exhausting. And you really only do it, it's a tailwater up there, it's a dam release. Everybody know what I'm talking about, tailwater? And they base it on electrical demand or water capacity. This year they had so much rain, right? So when they turn that generator up, what it does is that all that water flushing down the river makes those fish push to the edges. They don't want to sit out there and expend energy and fight all that current. So you'll flush those big fish, a lot of them, to the edges of the river where you can actually get at them. So then it's all about that prey drive. So let's say that big monster male brown trout that I'm still hunting for moves out to the edge of the river and he finds a nice rock to get behind to get out of that current, right? So what I'll do is try to time that drift where I've got my fly in the strike zone, which is usually somewhere around 4 to 6 feet underwater. Again, that kind of magic depth we're talking about. And again, I want to come just over his head where he just sees it and goes, whoop! That's what you're looking for, just snatch it, right? So let that sink down, then back to that strip, timing those strips out. Sometimes they're fast, and I've had so many just enormous fish just follow that streamer all the way to the boat. I mean, the feathers will just be on its nose like a tarpon, and it leaves you thinking, man, what did I do wrong? I should have stripped it faster. And it's just fish. Sometimes they just don't feel like eating, you know. But when they do, they'll commit 100%. For catching a world-class giant brown trout, I think your best bet is Arkansas over anywhere on the globe. New Zealand, Patagonia, maybe when the sea run browns come back in Tierra del Fuego, but Arkansas is a lot closer and a lot cheaper to get to. Not as cool, there's no volcanoes or anything like there are down there, but a lot of big fish. They have fine spot cutthroats, they got brook trout, and then they have a new species of cutthroat in both rivers called a Bonneville. And those are cool. They're kind of silvery, and most of their spots are towards the tail, and they have the potential to get big. Like, you know, all fish have indiscriminate growth, but the Bonnevilles will get big. So all kinds of things that fall over the top of the dam. I've caught spotted bass, stripers, all kinds of stuff in the river when they're like running the spillway gates open on the top, and fish just fall over the top. So a guy caught like a 50-pound striper on the North Fork this year that fell over the top of the dam, I guess. Somehow it made it through. So we kind of talked about, you know, a lot about boat positioning and fishing, different types of fish to go after. I fish for anything with fins around here with a fly rod. I'll catch carp, I catch gar. If you just want something fun to catch, a nice long-nosed gar on like a 5-weight fly rod is a tremendous battle, and they're everywhere and no one messes with them. Carp are also extremely fun to catch, very hard to catch too on a fly rod till you kind of get it. Excellent saltwater trainer fish. So let's say that you're getting into fly fishing and you want to go and do a redfish trip, and I'll tell people, go practice and see if you can catch a carp. If you can catch a carp with a fly, redfish is a cake. And they eat little flies. They got little bitty suction cuppy mouths, little soft tissue mouths. So, you know, for a carp fly, I like a fly that rides hook up like this. So I tie a fly on a kind of a bent long bent shaft hook, and I put the barbell eyes underneath so it kind of sits up like a seesaw. Think about a seesaw, up in the one end up in the air, right? And then that way it kind of crawls like this, and the hook's up here, so when the cart goes like this, it immediately gets on the top of the beat. And that's where you really want to hook a fish, because you can steer it. You know, if you've ever foul hooked a fish, yeah, that's fun, right? By foul hooking like a giant trout in a river flowing that way, on like a 4-weight fly rod and 6X line. You're running down there. Oh man, yeah, it's tough. Going for a new species I haven't caught yet when we're in Wisconsin at the end of the month for Paddlesports retailer. We're gonna meet up with a fly guy buddy of mine. Hopefully he's gonna put us on some muskie. He catches giant muskie on it. You think the brown trout flies, his muskie flies are like this big. They are huge. And it's another one of those fish, you might fish 2 days and you might get 2 shots, like two takes. You might fish 3 days and get nothing. So be prepared. But, you know, you're looking for giant alligator-looking fish that are this big. So they don't show themselves very often. So you want to be ready. You know, on that note, you know, if I'm in a river fishing, like we're talking about, you know, one of the hardest things when I bring people up to Arkansas for the first time and we're streamer fishing, right? Even if they can cast a fly rod really well, even if they have some experience casting a sink tip, which is a little different, your launch angle, everything is a little different. It's heavier, it's tiring. Because a sink tip fly line is basically a fly line that's got a section of it that weighs, is full of lead, basically, right? So it's like flinging a 2-pound rope around in the air all day, 2-pound string, okay? And then the fly sometimes will have a big, heavy skull head on it with 2 gigantic hooks whizzing by your head. That freaks people out a little bit sometimes. Where I see people, the most things they end up fishing way behind the boat because you're floating this way, usually at a brisk pace. Then you give it time to sink down, get to where I want it to be, and then so that when I start stripping it, it's coming right in front of that object. So you really have to train yourself to start thinking downstream. And the faster the boat goes, the further downstream you've got to be thinking and casting. By the time problem is if I'm here, and even if I cast parallel to myself, or maybe even if I'm looking at a clock, I use the clock to describe a lot of stuff in fishing. So if people are fishing me and I say something at 2 o'clock, then they know wherever they're looking is 12. So think of yourself as a clock, think 2, right? So even if I'm casting at 2 o'clock in fast water, by the time the line's down in the strike zone and stripping, it's usually back behind the boat, okay? And then you're stripping it at a weird angle. You know, I want the fly coming right at the boat, almost like across the current. Does that make sense? So got to start programming yourself. So if you start fly fishing, you're ever in a river situation, smallmouth, same thing with a popper too. If you're floating down the river and I say, ooh man, look at that, you know, desk. You can get a couple of pops in right quick, and a lot of times that's all you need for bass, but you need to start thinking ahead of that too, because I like to work a popper for bass slow. Yes.
You were talking about, you know, fishing ahead and moving water and stuff. Is that why you're using chain? Not so much to just stay put, to let it drag and keep the nose of the boat kind of oriented downstream, down.
Definitely can. I'm not as huge a fan of using drag chains in rivers because rivers have lots of debris.
Right.
And they can get hung up. So if you're gonna use a drag chain, then at some point in that link of things, you need a piece of like stretch tubing that will break. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So for example, I've seen guys on the White River, big river, 20-foot, you know, flat bottom river boats using a drag chain, but in the middle of it, they've got a bicycle tube. If it gets hung up, it's gonna stretch, and it's gonna snap. You lose your chain. Better than sinking your boat. You always keep a knife handy too. I like a knife that cuts rope. Okay, a curved blade that's serrated. That will cut. You get a straight blade knife. Oh man, especially some of this rope is tough. You put this thing under it, boom, it's gonna cut it. And when you're flowing down a river, even moving like a top water slow, you still have a very finite amount of time where you're gonna be able to do something before you got to cast again. And another thing when I talk, like I've done some topwater bass fishing clinics for fly, is, you know, pot shot structure, you know, hit the chair, hit the tip of the boat, wherever you think something is, bop, 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 work it a few times, move it. Because if something's down there and it's going to hit it, usually it's going to mash it pretty quick. Every now and then, there's always an exception where, oh, I'll let it sit there and I was getting tangle out and a fish ate it. Yeah, that can happen. It's not going to happen all the time. So I'm floating, I cast, bang, 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 and I'm always, again, you know, when you're floating downriver, you always got to be thinking what's coming up. Okay, overhead trees, what's behind me? You got to cast. There's a lot of stuff going on in the fly rod too. That's where, you know, a conventional rod's a lot easier. I can just go, there you go. Who cares what's behind me? You know, the fly rod, I've got to have usually as much room behind me, or about half as much room behind me as I want to go forward. Does that make sense? You need a certain amount of line out beyond that rod tip for it to generate enough force to get it where it's going. And mainly, if I'm trying to slow myself down in a river, it's a drift sock. Okay, and that'll put you a little bit of some brakes on for you. That'll slow you down some. So we kind of talked about bass fishing, red fishing, how skinny you can get in these, how stable they are, pros and cons of the platform. You obviously can see there's a lot of different ways to places to put gear, and being that it's such a nice flat blank canvas of a boat, there's just a tremendous amount of different places you can mount stuff. And what I like to tell people is get what you need to go out. Like the one accessory I say to get immediately on a Diablo is the marine mat kit. This padding right here. One, it quiets the boat down tremendously, gives you a non-slip, not hot surface to stand on, and it just looks awesome, okay, which is the most important thing. That's what the fish really care about, okay? And then you'll obviously need a chair and a paddle. And then get out and fish a bit and see where you want stuff, you know? You might want things in a different spot. Definitely, too, with conventional, you will definitely want things in a different spot.
I can't help but ask this because I've never used a fly rod, but have you ever fished docks or tried skipping under a dock?
Oh yeah.
Have you ever skipped under a dock?
Oh yeah.
Right.
And what's also I can do is to deliver a sidearm cast where it's just hovering a couple feet off the water.
Oh, great.
I've even done that. Like I really want to get low and get down on my knees and cast. Again, though, you need to have the clearance around you to pull that off with the fly rod. The line's got to be able to travel beside you and behind you. And a lot of times, if it's windy, I'm sidearming a lot. I saltwater fish sidearm quite a bit, or at kind of an angle. You know, people think, you know, the cast and flyer, that traditional 2 o'clock, and that's great and all for teaching, but in actual practical fishing conditions, that changes dramatically to what's around you. How much room do I have? What am I trying to do with this fly? How windy is it? Where's the wind coming from? The main thing you want to remember to do with a fly rod is move the tip of it in a straight line. And what I mean by that is, so you have a couple of the different things going on. So what you don't want with a fly rod is windshield wiper. Okay, the tip is moving on an arc. Okay, that creates the tailing loops, because when you cast a conventional rod, you're throwing the weight of a lure, and it's bringing the line with it, right? So what's really nice is when you have that like that braided line with no memory, you know, it's just limp and it just sails, right? So the fly line's the opposite. What you're casting is the weight of the line, and you're just trying to allow it to roll completely straight and then pull it back the other direction. That's really it. That's the physics of it. And what you want to do that is to make sure that your rod tip's moving linear in a straight line. The further you're trying to cast, though, the longer my casting stroke needs to be. Like if I'm just trying to cast from here to the red tablecloth, I can probably just do this, okay, with about that much effort. But if I'm saltwater fishing, I need to fire a cast, you know, all the way to the wall or the back corner, then my stroke's going to widen out, okay? And how you achieve that with your fly rod, and once you get beyond the pivot point of your elbow, is you allow your arm to drift backwards like this, but you're always keeping that rod tip on the same line. If you want to get into fly rodding for bass, invest your money in a quality rod and a good line that agrees with that rod as far as the casting, and the reel is basically just a line holder. You'll never fight a largemouth bass on the reel. It's not how it works. No, you'll strip, bang, and then you're stripping, because if a largemouth bass gets to go back into his stick fortress underwater where he was living with your fly, he's gone. So you got to keep his head above water. Same thing with redfish, you want to control them. Depends on what you're going after. Bass, redfish, streamer fishing most of the time, you've got so much line out and you're stripping it in that's how the fight goes. Smallmouth fishing, same thing. You're stripping in. That's what I like. It's the tug of war, that visceral feeling of feeling the fish on the end of your line there. So most of your sink tip lines are fairly short. Like I use about anywhere from 16 to maybe a 26-foot sink tip, depending on how fast the water's flowing and how deep I want to get down. Mainly I'll go with the longer, heavier one when the water's flowing fast, just because you need to get that fly down as quick as possible. So those are usually in the 350 grain and above. So I mean, it's like, like I said, it's like casting around a 2-pound piece of string. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you can combine that with the grip strength you need and everything to manipulate that, because it's still the same. You still need to stop that fly rod and let that line bend it and load it, cast it forward. But it does change. It's another thing I see when people they come streamer fishing. They're doing a lot of the false casting like you would a dry fly, where it's the line back and forth in the air a lot, and all that energy is wasted. You want to be able to. You'll see the guys that have done it a good bit. They'll have a little bit of line out, because the trick is you got to cast not super far, maybe at most about 50 feet. If you're casting much further than that, then your guide probably just needs to get you closer to the bank. Okay, 50 feet tops. A lot of times you're in the mid-30s. That's kind of my sweet spot with the streamer, because I like that. You want to be far enough away where they don't really see you that much. I don't want to be so far away where I'm just having to prove how far I can cast all the time.
Right, yeah.
If I don't have to cast that far, then let's save the shoulder a little bit. You know what I mean? So, but you do want to strip it all the way to the tip. You will get eats right at the boat. Okay, so then it's like, okay, now I've stripped my fly all the way to the tip. I still need to get some of that line back out beyond the tip to get enough of it to start generating momentum. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I'll do with the streamer is I'll kind of let the water grab the fly, and I'll just kind of flick it behind me and let go of the line and let some sail, and I'll let it hit the water again and then grab it and then just flick it all forward again. So I'm letting the water do a lot of my work for me. It looks nothing like your traditional cast, but I'm not doing traditional fly fishing.
If it works, use it.
Yeah, and it's way more effort. I'll wait till I feel the viscosity of the line. Don't really let it sink, just till it grabs. And then, because what happens is, when you pull that fly off the water, any fly, or just fly line for that matter, that's why I tell people, if you really want to practice fly casting, do it on the water, not your yard. Because your yard doesn't have the viscosity of water. It doesn't grab the fly line when you pick it up. When you pick up fly line off the water, that initiates the forward bend in your rod. That's the initial part of the load. You're going to use that energy transfer backwards to get to the next part of your cast, your forward cast. Okay? And that's what fly casting fly rod's all about, is learning how to feel the load of the rod when the line causes the rod tip to bend. That's why we bring it back and we bring it to a stop. I'll stop the rod here. When the line straightens out behind the tip just at the right time, you'll feel the tip of the rod get tugged backwards just a little bit. That's when you go forward with it, kind of like a bullwhip. When you hear that whoosh, cracking noise, that means you're not waiting quite long enough. Okay, that's the telltale. If you're bullwhipping your line, you need to wait a little longer. The further you're trying to cast, the longer you need to wait. So that's where you just got to practice, practice, and practice on water. Because there's a way to pick up line off water too, how to start that whole process efficiently. You can't just snatch it off. The most common mistake people make with a fly rod is they put all the speed in the beginning of the cast. They'll grab it and they'll yank it, and then they slow the rod down the back end of it. So the line gets snatched off the water, and then it tries to slow down, so it's going, and then it kind of loses some energy and starts to crumble. So it's the other. You want to pull slow, get it moving, and then boom, and then bring it to a stop. So you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 4. Always keeping that tension. Line straightening out, throwing loops. And that just comes with time, And I think once people experience that, and especially once I get somebody catch their first bass on a fly rod, usually you see that light switch go on. It's so much fun. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people, oh, I've been fly fishing for, since I was so years old. And I go, yeah, well, where do you like to bass fish? You can catch bass on a fly rod? So, yeah, you just don't see a lot of people doing it. You can put flies in places you can't. I've got some weedless, really light foam frogs that I could throw into anything and get it back out. It will not get hung up. And it's super light. I can crawl it over the nastiest algae mats and then just drop it in a hole. And then the tricky part then is, okay, now how do I get the fish out? I'll worry about that then.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, we'll deal with part 2 in a second. But you can get flies in places where you just can't get most conventional lures.